Thank you very much indeed, Anne. And I'll conclude now with Mr. Ayele. Let's get your impression. How should government participate in that JV in the first instance? Which option would you consider most viable?
Okay. I'm not sure how to respond to that now, but I mean, at the moment, government participation. Oh, by the way, you're aware that in the joint ventures, government actually holds majority interests.
Yes.
Exactly, 55% in the case of Shell, and 60% in case of the other JVs. You know what that means is that it is entitled, or it is responsible to put up that amount of cash for its annual work program and budget, and as well entitled to that volume of petroleum, you know, that is produced. You know, and what it has done traditionally is to cede operation to some of the more internationally acclaimed entities, such as Exxon, Chevron, and the likes of them, you know, to run, and then it's a funding party, participates in discussions, I mean, in decision-making through the governance framework, you know, and in fact, it almost has a second bite at the cherry in real life, because beyond the fact that it leads the operating committee, it chairs the operating committee of most of these joint ventures, a lot of the decisions are actually also referred to NNPC to stamp. So it has, in my view, a very good grip of the joint venture arrangements. But the issue perhaps is whether or not Nigeria in the present play can afford to devote that amount of funds to operations. And I think that's probably the real, the real question. I believe that we should consider perhaps selling down.
To who? To small players or to the existing ones, the multinationals?
Now you can sell. I mean, if you take the NLNG, for example, you know, which is an incorporated joint venture, government's interest in the NLNG is about 49%, which meets the international best practices for government participation in a listed entity. Yeah, and so it funds its operations through equity and debt, and not cash calls. So it does not constitute any kind of call it strain on government purse, which I mean on government funds, which is very well needed now for other things. You know, so that's definitely something you can look at. There have been suggestions about even floating this, converting some of these joint ventures to incorporated joint ventures, and floating the stock on the stock exchange, which will expand, you know, the economy in terms of the participation of ordinary Nigerians in this particular venture, and then it will remit, you know, the government's share to it, to the federation account, and of course will be subject to the payment of royalty and taxes. And so I make the argument perhaps that government can still earn as much as it does without necessarily getting involved in the day-to-day management of the companies.
Well, from the look of things, I'm just wondering, what kind of opportunity did you see, or did we even have that kind of opportunity? I'm talking about when the president visited the U.S. now, in terms of getting more buyers for Nigeria's oil. We do know that the U.S. has scaled down. They've got shale, and so who knows? It might be a question of time before other parts of Europe also do something about that. But as the days go by, we may just have a lot less countries buying our oil. Did we have an opportunity to, say, increase U.S. participation in terms of buying our oil when the president visited? Or it looks as though we should begin to look elsewhere?
Okay, I would imagine that would be a question best put to somebody who was in that party. But again, even from the thing we picked, I mean, from what we picked in the public arena, I'm not sure that was even a goal or a target for the president, and I don't know.
When he visited, right?
When he visited, it would seem as if the agenda was different.
Should it have been?
Well, the US's imports from Nigeria, as you're aware, came to zero by July last year. And as a matter of fact, July last year didn't even take us by surprise, because indeed anyone who follows petroleum policy globally knew that that day was going to come. As soon as the shale revolution happened in the US, a country that produced about 3 million barrels of oil a day, had shot up its daily production to about 8 million barrels and rising, thereby meeting its own internal consumption requirements, and is in a position to, in fact, is in a position to export. Exactly. Those decisions are not based on emotional considerations, to be honest. And I'm not sure that it is of any kind of priority to the US to buy oil from us. And it probably can get worse, because we've turned to the Asian Pacific basin.
India happens to be, I think they've increased their interest in our oil these days.
Well, yes, and the likes of it, there's China, India, but those parts of the world are, our traditional market is what you refer to as the Atlantic basin. In terms of proximity, that's Europe, America, and the likes of the Atlantic basin. But a lot of things are happening to change the play.
Even in Africa.
Today. Precisely, especially in Africa, So if you think about the finds, or not many of them prolific at this moment, but if you think about the activity in Central to Eastern Africa, if any of those were to become prolific today, then they are nearer that particular basin,
in other words,
trade basin.
There are many options now for those who are looking to Africa.
Precisely. So what we're saying is that supply is actually growing, demand is shrinking. So what that means is, we need to begin to take a mid to long-term view of increased domestic utilization of our petroleum.
Let's look at that issue of the domestic utilization. For instance, some of the products that come out of refining this crude, they would have been of immense economic benefits to the country.
Absolutely.
But how is it that we don't seem to be looking at that?
Well, good question. I have heard somebody say that it is indeed not a very smart country that, in fact, even exports oil. The textile industry collapsed around the late 90s, and that was a tragic event, because I was raised in southern Kaduna, and can relate firsthand to the things that happened in that place. The textile industry was the second highest employer of labor, next only to government. And why did it collapse? It collapsed because it couldn't compete with imports coming, especially from the Far East. It imported about everything, even cotton, good grade cotton to mix with the poor grade cotton that was being produced here, dye stuff, chemicals, and the likes of it, which are all derivatives of petroleum. So a viable petrochemical industry is essential to feeding, your industries on many levels. If you're thinking in terms of, macroeconomic policy. So you're right that, we should not only respond to the current situation in a knee-jerk, exports are drying up, but we should in fact see the opportunity. I'm not suggesting in any way that, we should junk exports and just, no. But we need to manage the transition very nicely. I believe that, one of the things we can do presently, and, something I was discussing with someone yesterday, and I said, our current attitude to the investing community is, look, we have excellent geology. Nigeria has one of the finest geologies around the world, easy to access, sweet quality crude, what we call sweet crude, light, good refining qualities. And that led to some sort of hubris on our part, over the years, and we have again one of the highest takes around the world, equivalent to Malaysia. It's about 85%. The government take is about 85%. But in the current play, where demand is, is shrinking vis-a-vis supply, can we afford to maintain that posture? Yeah, and should we in fact be considering the possibility of extending again fiscal incentives and tax breaks and the likes to draw in producers, yeah, to be able to then supply the external markets? Because if the cost of production is lower, then perhaps the price to the market will be able to compete. At the end of the day, it will come to that, while in that same, at the same time, building capacity for local utilization.
Let me drop this one before we go. Do you think we should deregulate? I
believe we should deregulate. Because of the multiplier effect on the economy and the
so is the way to go?
To everybody, I believe that we should.
Even though there will be a lot of pain as it is.
Well, which is where, especially yourselves, have the responsibility. Because sometimes I remember sitting at home and watching the famous whatever, and sometimes I felt like crying because of the sort of opinions that were being bandied about the place. But I think you should research it. You should, or at the very least, engage. Engage the people in a lot of conversation, and let's have a robust debate as to the merits and demerits, benefits and otherwise of deregulation, and at least sensitize the society as to what little inconvenience we may need to suffer now in order to be able to break into a more prosperous 21st century.
Okay, that's where we'll anchor. Thank you very much indeed. Israel Aye is an energy legal consultant. We've been talking about the federal government's plan to restructure the NNPC. We'll be back after the break. Join us again.